Hello, and what is up, everybody? It is the Wind Up Podcast. I'm your host, Mike of MTGA Wines, and we're back. Diving further into Harvest, answering a couple more questions, talking about the dollars and cents of the wine industry, trends, vibes, all the things. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get started, as usual, a couple of quick announcements. First and foremost, be sure to follow us, subscribe to the show, leave a quick rating or review if you see fit. If you like what you're hearing, please share it with your friends, family, other winos in your realm. You can follow us on all of our social networks at MTGA Wines. We're most active on YouTube and Instagram, but you can also find us on the Book of Face as well as the social network formerly known as Twitter. Head to our website, mtgawines.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, find more information about us, our wine club, the wines we produce, all kinds of good stuff. Schedule a tasting appointment, all the little things. Please be 21 years of age or older to do all that goodness. With that in mind, we are coming up on our next wine release that's coming at the end of this month. So in 2 weeks, basically, we're going to be sending out that release notice. So for those of you that are on our mailing list in our wine club, please keep an eye out for that. We'll have some updates on what wines are being sent out and what's being offered this fall. And at that point, you can always customize it and adjust it as you see fit. Let's just dive right in, shall we? There's a handful of things that we're going to dive into today. Again, you can always check out the the timestamps in the description of the video. If there's a certain topic or something that you want to, dive further into, you can fast forward a little bit and bounce around however you want to. So please check that out if you want to, I guess. We also have some of the links to, our site, some of the articles we reference, all that good stuff down there if you feel like reading through some of that stuff. I want to thank you guys we got some great responses after last week's episode where we dove kind of back into the additive conversation, particularly around things like tartaric acid and like yeast and stuff that are, in essence, they're natural part of the kind of winemaking ecosystem, and that the fact that they're being utilized in like additional volume to stabilize a wine or get a fermentation done appropriately. I'm glad that all of you kind of are picking up what I'm putting down. And I hope that my argument of, the rationale of like, hey, why aren't these, additives listed, or why do wineries not have to publish this kind of stuff, and why that frustrates me versus like they shouldn't be used, because I have no problem with a winery using, again, any of these substances as long as hopefully they disclose that to you, the consumer, but obviously the overwhelming majority of them don't. And that's worldwide. That's not just Napa. That's not the U.S. That is worldwide we're talking about. Every country does this in some way, shape, or form. So it's not just us that we're talking about here. But it seems like, this is you guys kind of, you're capitalizing on what I think the argument is for transparency, which is we're simply giving you the information, and then you as a consumer can make up your own damn mind about what you want to consume, right? Hell, before I started recording today, I had my monthly bag of hot Cheetos, and they were so damn delicious. My stomach feels gross, but man, they're yummy. So, you get to choose. But again, you can see all those different things and red dyes and other things that are in those hot Cheetos versus, say, a wine that has mega purple in it, or that had tartaric acid added to it, or any enzyme or like tannin powder or any of this other stuff that can be utilized. None of that stuff has to be disclosed. So that's always been my frustration. It sounds like all of you who are listening are kind of on that same page. We did have a great question regarding tartaric acid, because that was a big example we used last week, and how that might impact the taste of the wine, or is it more just controlling spoilage or avoiding spoilage? And it's certainly the latter. It's more about adjusting the pH level of the wine and reducing it so that you have a more stable product. Wine in itself is a pretty acidic beverage. Very typically you're having wines range from a pH level of like 3.3 up to like 3.8, right? And anything north of 3.8 is kind of this danger zone. And when you get north of 4 as a pH, that's when you're starting to ask for problems. Can you do it? Yeah, sure, you absolutely can. But if you're wanting to use less sulfites, if you're wanting to have to filter less, if you're wanting to have to do a lot of other less stabilization, like across the board to like mitigate potential spoilage, it behooves you to have a lower pH level. So the tartaric acid addition doesn't impart any additional flavor to the wine. It can and will make the wine more acidic, so it can make a wine more refreshing in quality, which can be beneficial because if a wine gets north of that 4.0 pH, they can be kind of like soapy and flabby and just not have a lot of backbone and just kind of suck all around. So again, in order to make a more stable wine, something that is hopefully more enjoyable, you can use that as kind of an ace up your sleeve. And the nice thing about it is that it's in essence a concentrated form of what is already naturally occurring in the grapes. Is there some processing involved to extract it and get it into that concentrated form? Yeah, sure. Of course there is. It's no different than, manufacturing and creating or propagating some of the yeasts that we use in the laboratories that supply them to us. Some of them are genetically modified for certain flavors and characteristics, and there are plenty that we use, for example, that aren't. They're simply, that sourdough starter is always the analogy that I use, are just something that makes sure your fermentation kind of goes off without a hitch. Because the statistic that always blows my mind is that if you're going to do a natural fermentation, very typically less than 1% of the natural yeast readily available on those grapes in the vineyard is what you want to be using. So there's a 99% chance that you're going to start using other yeasts that could be detrimental to your fermentation. So if you're doing natural ferments, you really have to know what's going on in your vineyard and have a lot of really great experience with that so you understand what you're in for. Anyway, so I'm really thankful for you guys kind of diving right in and asking tough questions, challenging me and kind of my opinion on additives in these things and how they kind of integrate into wine production and what we do. It makes me really happy that it's an open kind of two-way conversation here rather than y'all just kind of staying quiet and taking my word as gospel, because you definitely shouldn't. I'm here to hopefully not just challenge your thoughts and opinions on wine and kind of what it can mean to you and your life, but also for myself as well. I'm a huge proponent of that kind of stuff, is that it behooves us to kind of challenge ourselves every day in our belief structure and take that for what it is, I suppose. All right, let's get into the harvest side of things. This has been like the slowest. This might be, I'm thinking back to 2023, 2011, 2016. I'm thinking back to some of the cooler, maybe rainier years that we've had over the last decade and a half. And I feel like I don't remember a slow roll like this. Roughly, what is it today? Wednesday. So we had, 8 days ago, we brought in Chenin Blanc for the Blair Payton label. Nothing else is ready yet. We're going to bring in a little bit of rosé, I think either before this weekend or after it. That's going to be a whole 1 ton of Grenache. I mean, it's going to take more time to process it than it is to. It's going to take more time cleaning everything than it is to actually process that, which is annoying. We are bringing in some Merlot on Sunday morning, bright and early. We got that going for us, which is nice. But it's just one small step for winemaking kind. It's very interesting so far this season. And I know it's slow because I'm sipping on a protein shake because I went to the gym not an hour and a half ago. If I have time in the middle of the week during harvest to hit the gym and get a workout in, it's clearly pretty slow. It's not uncommon that I don't get to the gym at all for 2 months during the fall because I'm too fucking busy. I'm running around from one vineyard to the next. We're at the winery all day. We're in the vineyards at night. It's crazy. And this year it's really interesting. 2023 did have this vibe because we got all of our white wines in. They all went dry. The fermentation's wrapped up. We put them to bed for the rest of the season and to start the aging process. And then the reds came in. And it was this really nice, methodical way of doing things. This year seems to be stretching it out even more. There's even more time in between the picks because I think, maybe it's about the same. I mean, it's going to be roughly about 2 weeks before we have our next batch of fruit really in the cellar and wine being made, which was about the vibe in 2023. It was like every 2 weeks more stuff came in, which gave us so much time to just focus on the wines that were there, get shit done, and not feel kind of the normal overwhelming just wave of harvest crashing into you. It's pretty awesome. I know I'm starting to freak out a little bit. Like I'm not used to the calm nature of this because I'm not sleeping very well. Like I'm overtly like nervous. I'm waking up at like 2 a.m, wide awake. Like, what do we got to do? And there's nothing to do. Like everything's fine. Like I can go back to bed, and I sit there for an hour trying to convince myself that I can calm down and get another like 3 to 5 hours of sleep and not worry about it. It's weird. It's when you're so used to like chaos during a particular time of year, or maybe within your job or whatever. And some of you probably experience this in your own careers. Like you get so used to like the grind and the hustle and just the go nature, that when you have that, little like it's not as nutty as you thought it was going to be, or maybe it's just, this year's not nearly as crazy as they normally are. It feels weird, right? It feels like you're doing something wrong. It's a little bit of that imposter syndrome, something, I don't know, where it's like, it doesn't feel like I've checked every box. My email inbox is pretty clean. There's a couple of things I got to take care of. There's not like any earth-shattering things happening. It's very strange that I feel so on top of things. And there's work to be done, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm just, kicking rocks down the street during the week waiting for grapes to come in. Like there's plenty of like admin stuff and planning for our club shipment and, preparing for, preparing equipment for harvest still and getting ready to bring in grapes. Like there's still stuff to do. There's still vineyards to walk through. There's still things going on, but it's like an 8-hour day at best, especially now that the Chenin Blanc fermentations are starting to like roll or kind of like wrap up. They'll be pretty much be done by the end of this week, actually. So, with that in mind, we're going to be kind of like twiddling our thumbs for a little bit until the next round of grapes come in. That's going to be a little strange. That will be a little strange, but it's all right. Like it's fine. Like everything's great. The weather's been amazing. This is like a really nice, cool week. It's not even getting out of the 70s for the most part, maybe low 80s at best. So it's like this nice little, chill vibe that's going through the valley right now. Everything's kind of slowed down a touch, which was great after having that heat spike last week. We've got some weather going up into the 90s next week, I believe, which means harvest is going to come hard and fast after that. I think there are a lot of vineyards right now, and sugar, just so you guys all know, like kind of the shot across the bow is like the sugar level in the grapes, the degrees Brix. In essence, kind of like the specific gravity and how we measure the percentage of sugar that are in those grapes. That's kind of our shot across the bow if the grapes are ready. Now, there's always the caveat that, hey, the flavors have to be there. This happened with our Merlot 2 weeks ago. Through that heat wave, the sugar spiked up, but the fruit still tasted green and like bad. It was not ripe yet, even though the sugar level was high enough. So you have to kind of play that game of chicken a little bit of, the sugar is there, but the flavors aren't. And the sugar is not going to give you the flavor that you need. You got to wait for that physiological ripeness to kind of continue pushing forward. And really kind of this last weekend, it started to turn that corner, which is great, which means we can harvest that Merlot pretty much any time in the next week, especially with this cool weather, and it's going to come in just fine. But we are getting texts pretty regularly from our girl, like, the sugar's getting high, I'm like, it's fine, just relax. It's hot out. Put a little bit more water on those vines just so we can avoid like raisoning and things of that nature. That'll be great. We have a cool spell coming, so sugars are going to recede a little bit actually once those grapes, rehydrate and plump up a little bit, and we'll be fine. Like it's all good. The joys of like doing this for a decade and a half and just kind of knowing, having gone through pretty much every, I think, scenario almost of like growing seasons at this point. You just have like your check boxes, and based on what Mother Nature is doing, you get to check certain boxes, and it's like, okay, if you're checking box A, skip box B, go to C. It's like doing your taxes. You're just filling out the form, and depending on how you're filling it out, you have to either fill out more information or provide a different schedule or whatever, right? Which actually I hate that I use that analogy. It reminded me of something actually, because this is something that I actually quite literally forgot to, like, there's been a couple of years now where I guess I forgot to file a specific form with like the state of California. So we got a letter from them. They're not happy about them. We owe them money. And it's like, okay, we'll cut you a check. Let's sort this out. And I have our tax professionals actually sorting through all of that because we have to fill out this form and backdate some stuff and like go figure it out, which is annoying. And it reminds me of like, how frustrated I get with like the back end, paperwork side of this business, because there's just so much stuff that you just can't possibly keep track of. This is why we've now outsourced our like tax preparation stuff. Cause I'm like, I know I'm going to screw it up, and I did. Go figure, I did. And now we got to play cleanup here. And so that's like, to use that analogy, that's what we're trying not to do when it comes to like harvest and winemaking. Is you don't want to clean up a mess. You don't want to, start on the wrong foot and have something come back to bite you later. I've done that before as well in winemaking, where I had one of our Rieslings start re-fermenting in bottle after we had bottled it. That was not cool, but I screwed up, and it was an amazing learning experience because not only did I recognize it, but we fixed it before we lost a whole lot of inventory. And we did have to filter that wine. We filtered that wine and rebottled it, and it was fine. It tasted great. But, you had to go through that like hardship of forgetting to do something. Frankly, in that situation, I simply read a lab report wrong, which is so dumb. It's like basic clerical oversight, much like this little state of California thing that we're dealing with. Luckily, it's not a huge issue. It's the state just wants their money, and I'm like, all right, we got you. Plus some like fees and penalties and shit. And I'm like, well, that's a bill I didn't feel like paying this fall, but it's my bad. So here we are, But I suppose that's a pretty good analogy. It's kind of the, you want to be prepared. Because I do love, what's the quote? It's like preparedness plus opportunity equals luck kind of thing. Like when you're ready to do things, or you're practicing kind of the, preventative, medicine side of anything, where you're just making sure you have a solid plan in place, things tend to go really, really well. Like logistically, things just are better. They're less stressful. It's less of an issue, right? And that's kind of, I suppose, a benefit of a nice slow season like this, is that you have plenty of time to be prepared. So if something goes dreadfully awry this year for anybody because of a lack of preparedness, that they screwed up in a way that I can't even begin to imagine. Because we're talking, going into mid-September now, harvest has started for sure, but it's a very slow roll. There's plenty of time to make sure like operations are ready to rock and roll. There's no reason for fuck ups to happen right now. And you should be prepared. Now, let's face it, at a certain point, there's going to be the peak of this bell curve that we call harvest, and it's going to be crazy, long hours, long days, lack of sleep, overly caffeinated, something will break. There will be an issue. There always is. Every harvest has its thing. But if you've trained well and you've prepared yourself, you'll be fine. It'll be just fine. I'm excited. This year just continues to be kind of the, next best thing. I think that between like 2023 and a year like this, these are going to be vintages that it's going to be worth like aging them a little bit longer. They're probably going to be a little structured. They're going to be a little tight, I think, at release. Maybe not as much as, say, like a 98 or an 11, but certainly going to need a little bit of time. I haven't tasted through my 23s. Have I bottled all my... Yeah, that's what we bottled. We just bottled all of our 23s. I'm trying to think, like, it has been a little bit of a blur over the last 2 months. But we did bottle all of our 23s. They've been in bottle for a month now, a month and change. I haven't tried them just yet. This is typically what I do, is like a month after bottling, I go through and try everything. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll try all those and just kind of see where they're at. And based on what I was tasting as they were going through the bottling line, I'm like, all right, these are going to be solid. It's just going to be a matter of time for these wines. That's truly what I believe about cold vintages like this, or cool vintages like this, is that sometimes it just takes time for them to kind of settle into their groove and, evolve into what you kind of naturally want them to be. I think that's really the thing. So we'll see. We'll see all in good time with how this vintage actually shakes out. All right. We did have another question. Both these questions that kind of came through. Shout out to Mike out in the Carolinas. And this was regards to like kind of the logistics of harvest, kind of speaking of which, kind of like this planning that goes into harvest. And it was quite simply like, do you bring in your own crew? What happens if multiple groups are leasing the plot in the same vineyard? How do you kind of like organize your pick day, and how do you balance that with other people that might be sourcing from that vineyard, which is something that we do every single year. There are only a couple of vineyards that we've sourced from in the past that we're taking, in essence, all of that fruit, and there's no one else working with it. Number one, what we try and do is, it depends. There's a lot of variables. We do a little bit of everything because it depends kind of like who's on first here. If the grower has their own farming crew or the farming company they work with, we'll work directly with that team to kind of organize everything, or directly through the grower to work with that team and so on. So it's a great kind of synergistic relationship with their team and how they do things. It's very often that, a lot of these growers have been, farming these properties and have had them in the family or as a business for a lot longer than we've been sourcing grapes from them. So it behooves us to kind of trust the experts. Now, I know enough to be dangerous out in the vineyard. So if there are certain things I'm looking at that I don't like, that I think need work or whatever, it was a great example. I mentioned just kind of offhanded about our grower for the Merlot that, was worried about the sugar levels and the heat wave and all this stuff. And I was like, just turn on the water a little bit more. Let's make sure nothing raisins, and we'll keep an eye on it. I can make those judgment calls and say, hey, like, here's the order of operations of like what I think needs to happen to make sure that the vineyard stays in good condition and survives this heat wave, because we're not going to harvest for another week. Let's make sure it gets through this, and then we'll go back to our normal like watering schedule after that. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. We work hand in hand. And she even asked the question, I was like, do you think that'll be necessary? I'm like, honestly, just being that it's over 100 degrees outside, it's not going to hurt. Like that's the thing, is that, if you water, an extra gallon or two or whatever per plant, it's probably going to be okay. Depends on the vineyard site, soil composition, how much water retention there is, like all this other stuff. But realistically, if it's really, really hot outside and you're watering, some of that's going to evaporate anyway. You'll be fine, right? It was even like drizzling yesterday. We had a little batch of rain roll through. It's basically enough to knock the dust out of the air, but it's not so much rain that you're like, oh, this is a problem. Like tractors are going to get stuck. The vines are uptaking a lot of water and literally kind of watering down the fruit content. Like that wasn't going to be an issue, right? Like that's not the issue. It's just not. So, there are these things that we do get to like work very much as kind of this hired gun out in the vineyard with them to make sure that we're getting the quality that we want, right? So, sometimes that does require us to, it's rare, but every once in a while we'll have to manage kind of like our own crew to make sure that gets done. Typically if it's a relatively small plot, it's someone like me or Britt or a couple of friends going out and handling it. And there's plenty of other vineyard management companies and crews out there that you can kind of like contract this work through, basically. So there's plenty of options. Now, if there's multiple people leasing the same plot, this is where it can get a little tricky, because you kind of want to, there's always a little bit of a game here to be played, because there are going to be certain people that want a certain style of wine from that vineyard, and you might want something completely different. So, what we try and do is meet in the middle as best we can. That way the vineyard owner and their crew doesn't have to like go through the vineyard many, many, many times and really increase their expenses. As long as it's being done in a pretty responsible way and the fruit's going to be the quality that I want it to, I'm not going to ask for any like wide sweeping farming changes unless I see something that is like an overt problem. If there happens to be a lot of disease, if I see, a lot of, and by disease, I mean like diseased vines and things of that nature. If there's, a lot of raisening going on, if there's a lot of bird damage, like if there's certain things happening and it's not being mitigated at all, it's like, okay, like we need to have a real conversation about this. And this is going to be a much more serious conversation. But for the most part, there's not going to be like this huge like overhaul. There are going to be subtle tweaks, And when I talk to my growers and I work with their crews, it's, we just kind of get a good idea for where we're headed. And I trust a lot of their judgment because very typically they're the ones doing this vineyard work far more often than I am. They know that piece of land better than I do. It behooves me to trust the expert, right? If there's multiple people sourcing from it, honestly, I haven't been in a position where, there's been some sort of adversarial thing that happens. The only thing has been like pick dates. I have had growers that be like, hey, we're picking this vineyard this day for these people. We need to plug you in. And I tell them, and I've had to tell them on occasion, no, the fruit's not where I want it yet. Or even the opposite, like, hey, I'm going to pick early. Let's get this fruit in now. And they're like, can we wait a week until these other folks want to bring it in? My answer is always no. Like, we need to, if we're going to pick this fruit to make the style of wine I want to make, it's got to come in now. That can be annoying because it can cost more money, right? And typically the price we're paying per ton includes that labor. So if they're having to, spend more, we're cutting into their margins a little bit when it comes to, the fruit they're selling. But that's them as the ropes. That's what we sign the contracts for, is that we want our fruit to come in at a certain quality, at a certain level, and we're going to pull the trigger when we need to. We'll do the best we can to make it easy on you, but I'm not going to sacrifice, what I want to be doing with this fruit just because you have someone else that's going to harvest, the following weekend. This is something that we saw actually in 2022. This is a great example of kind of how that can be a little touch and go in terms of like your grower relations, because we've talked about this in the past. And if you're new here, if you didn't know, in 2022 we had this crazy heat spike in September that lasted about 10 days total, but 7 of those 10 days it was north of like 110 degrees out here. Pretty abnormal weather for us. And you had every grower in the world being like, we got to bring the fruit in. Like, it's going to be too damn hot. We don't have enough water. We got to do this. And in my experience, at least with our Bordeaux varieties, I had to go back to our growers and be like, hey, like, I'm sorry, this fruit's not ready yet. It still tastes green. The sugar level's not where we would want it to be anyway. We can either, if you have water left in your well or your reservoir, like, we can dump a bunch of water on this and try and like survive this heat wave. And that's going to be the best option, because I can either make mediocre wine at best with what you're telling me to pick now, or we can wait a week and hopefully make even better wine, or wait a week or 10 days, make even better wine, or same thing. We're still kind of having to work with fruit that's not where we want it to be. So there's really no doubt. Like, if you see that, if you have the ability to wait through a weather event like that, especially when your fruit's like not ready, there's really no downside to it, at least in my mind, because you either make mediocre wine now or you make great wine later. And then there's, the other side of that coin, if you wait, that, hey, it still might be challenging. It still might be tough to make good wine out of it because of just the situation that you're in. So it's not so much the other wineries so much that are leasing some of these properties. It's just the relationship with the grower and trying to make sure that you get what you need. There really haven't been a lot of times I've conceded to them. I'm pretty dead set on like, hey, we need to bring things in now. This is why we there's a lot of window time for us driving from one vineyard to the next, checking in on things, because we want to make sure that, the fruit's where it needs to be. When we went, I had to pick Brittany up drop her off at the airport last Thursday. That gave me time to go sample a Grenache vineyard for the rosé that we want to have come in. It was still like, oh, this is a solid week away. We can bring this in basically this Friday in a couple of days or after the weekend, but we want to bring it in before this next heat wave. Like, that's the goal. We know that if we wait through this heat wave or we get into it, it's probably not going to be what we want. So let's just, based on what nature's doing, let's get this fruit in within this window. And I love working with that grower out in Clarksburg. Shout out to Herringer Vineyards. They do just such a fucking awesome job. They make good wines in their own right, but they get like this small producer mentality. Even though they own a bunch of acreage, they understand what we're trying to do as a small producer. And they're willing to operate on a dime for us, which is just outstanding. So, we have a great relationship with them, and we're able to call those shots and work with them as long as we know what we're talking about. Like, that's kind of the key, is that if you kind of walk in, like you own the place, and it turns out you don't have that knowledge and the grower can't trust you to make a good decision, that's a whole problem, because now they see their vineyard like withering away late into the season. They're like, when are they going to fucking pick this? And we're like, it can wait. And man, I know some winemakers that do that. They're like, we'll get to it at some point. It's fine. And the word from the growers is just so hilarious, because they're like, these people, like, I mean, it's starting to turn into raisins. We got to get this fruit in. And sometimes it's a matter of like tank space and what you're trying to do, and at the production facility, there's all kinds of other variables that go into, the logistics of a harvest and making it happen. But these relationships are, interesting, and luckily pretty well defined, right? There's not a lot of room for surprises. The only time there have been surprises for me, actually, is there's been twice. Unfortunately, it was with the same grower. I'm not going to put them on blast, because I still have a good relationship with them. We're not working with them anymore because of these issues. It just, the relationship ran its course, which is a bummer. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, this just isn't worth the stress anymore. I got to find a new source. And luckily, I found another great one locally. I mean, literally just down the street from where this other vineyard was located. It's going to be a little different, but not so much so that it's not going to be at least congruent to what we've done in the past. But in 2 years, I wonder if, I don't even know if I've shared this on this show before. I feel like I have. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. Some of you might remember. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself with this story here. But in the first year, this would have been 2021? Yeah, 2021. Oh, no, this was 2022, actually. Yeah, this is 22, because 21, it was still kind of trucking along. In 2022, because I go out to manage all the picks at night, I check in with the vineyard foreman. We're chatting about what's going on, catching up, because we've known each other now for years. And he goes, oh yeah, we'll get your 3 tons to you. We'll get it delivered about this time in the morning. I was like, oh no, 3 tons. I needed 6. And there's 6 tons coming off the vineyard. He's like, oh no, we're only picking 3 for you. I'm like, well, I got 12 bins here. They got to be full, by the time they get to the winery. Like, that's what we're contracted for. And I always have, like, just in case, I always have the contract like downloaded on my phone, because this had never happened before, actually. And I showed him the contract. And he's like, oh shoot, okay, let me call the vineyard owner. So he calls the vineyard owner. She says, no, he's only contracted for 3. And I'm like, yeah, like, listen, this is what we're contracted for. Like, I have this signed piece of paper. And keep in mind, it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. Like, this is when we're trying to sort this out. Not exactly like the most ideal time to be like on the phone talking business, but here we are, right? And it turns out like they had looked at the wrong contract. Either it was either like the prior years, or they looked at a different wineries, because there were multiple people buying from this vineyard. And I said, that's great. Bring the fruit out. And we got all ironed out, and it was all fine. I think the issue, though, there was an issue before, the year before, actually. Oh yeah, they showed up with extra fruit. They're like, oh yeah, by the way, like, here's the fruit you ordered, and here's an extra like 3 or 4 tons. And I'm like, I don't want that fruit. They're like, no, just take it. It's fine. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's like an extra like 18 to like 22 grand. Like, I don't have that just laying around. Not only that, I have to buy more barrels. I got to bottle that at some point. Like, all these costs stack up very, very quickly. So we left those grapes. So we took what we needed off the truck and left this other ton. I'm like, sorry, you guys got to go. Like, I'm not taking this off the truck. Sorry. Like, I'm driving the forklift. Like, you're not, that's not going anywhere. And they, luckily enough, they sorted it out. They found somebody last minute to pick it up. I think they got a really good deal on that fruit, because the situation was lame, to say the least. But we figured it out. So again, like, kind of like really like, not like big issues, but like stuff we sorted out on the fly. However, in 2023, the same thing happened. And they're like, oh no, I confirm, like, we're contracted for 6 tons. They're like, yep, we're going to split it here to make sure that the other buyer gets what they need. And I go, great. So I manage the pick. We get them all started. Go, all right, I'll be at the winery bright and early so you can drop off, unload, and we'll be looking good. So everything was great. When the fruit got delivered the next morning, they showed up with a bunch of empty bins. And I said, hey, what's the deal? And they said, oh, no, we were only able to do 3 tons for you this year. I said, well, I'm contracted for 6. Like, if you're off a half a ton here or there, like, okay, fine. Like, that's something I can absorb. You're talking about half the production from this vineyard that I'm relying on. Like, I have say like club members and sales. Like I have stuff that I'm planning for. Like I need this fruit from this 2022 vintage or 2023 vintage. And they're like, well, sorry, we don't know what to tell you. So I texted the owner, was like, hey, what's the deal? Like, where's the rest of this? Got kind of this non-answer of like, oh, we have to, we're trying to split up the year. We think it's going to be lower yields. We want to make sure they get their fruit, the amount of fruit they want. You get at least fruit. We're going to have to split it up and just yada, yada, yada. I'm like, well, I mean, I still need this. Like, this is what the contract says. Like, I don't know what your deal is with this other person, but if you oversold this vineyard, like that's on you. And as far as I was concerned, I was like, all right, whoever signed their contract first, they're the ones that get the lion's share, right? That was kind of where my opinion was. Now, the great thing about 2023 though, was it was a bumper crop year. There's fruit available everywhere. So I immediately made a couple of calls, sent a couple of emails. And sure enough, there was a grower down in Coombsville that had fruit available. I don't remember how much he had, but I was like, hey, we got shorted. I literally was like, we got shorted about 3 tons. Do you think you have that much available? And he's like, yeah, we should have more than that if you want it, but we can do 3 for sure. I said, great. I'll come down, check out the vineyard, walk through it, see what's up, and we'll go from there. And it worked out. And I got a better price on it than what I was going to pay my original grower. So I saved some money on top of that. Otherwise, we would have had a problem. So long story longer, those are some of like the issues that you can deal with during harvest of like making sure you get what you're actually contracted for, making sure that they're picking from the correct rows. I've had picks that very unfortunately, they picked from the wrong section of the vineyard or combined sections where like one is one variety, one's the other variety, and they didn't label the bins appropriately. And you're like, guys, like, I can't accept this. You screwed this up, and we'll do the best, or we're going to do the best we can. But like, this is a huge problem. So, harvest isn't without its issues. And a lot of it's just comes down to basic line of communication and setting expectations, particularly with the contracts that we sign. So a lot of that, again, preparation and preparedness can avoid a lot of these issues. But every once in a while, like the last few years that I mentioned, you have these issues that kind of bubble up no matter what. And then you as a business owner, a winemaker in this sense, you get to make the executive decision of, do we work with these people anymore? And frankly, I got no time for no bullshit during harvest when I'm as busy as I am. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And then after that, I'm like, there's going to be no third time, right? That's basically how I operate. The good thing is that with all of these individuals I've mentioned, it's not like it's a bad relationship. I could call or text any one of them right now and be like, hey, how's it going? So we all kind of, at least I like to think that, we all kind of own our shit, which is nice. And if something goes wrong, we're like, yeah, sorry about that. That's my bad. Hopefully we can work together again in the future. It's a pretty copacetic thing, which is really nice. Because this valley's too damn small. I know some of you have jobs and industries and work with people, around certain states and locales. Like, we all kind of get that small industry kind of thing where everyone is, at best, a half a degree separated from somebody else, right? And with that in mind, like, there's no point, as frustrated as you might be with somebody in that moment, burning that bridge is going to do far more harm than just being like, you know what? We're going to talk about this later. We're going to go have lunch and we're going to fucking sort this out. Right? And that's the kind of stuff that we do out here to maintain a lot of these grower relationships, logistics, and making sure that, we've worked just too damn hard to get to this point in the season through, months of growing these grapes to a point where they're finally ready, and we have this one opportunity every year to get it right. Let's just work together to make sure we do the best we can with what we got. That's really what it comes down to. All right. There's the harvest updates and all the things. Shoot. I kind of blacked out there. I got on a roll and was like, I don't even know what... I had like my bullet points here of what we were going to go through. Hit the additive thing, hit a little bit about harvest, and then I found a vein and we just... ran with the logistics and the relationship side of things in the industry. So hopefully you found it, insightful or interesting in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all. Again, be sure to follow us on those social networks at MTGA Wines. Check out subscribe to the podcast wherever you're consuming it. If you can leave a little rating or review, please do. Share with your wino friends as well. Oh, hey, Grover, what's up? There he is. We have a surprise guest here in the office. This needy beast. If you're watching the video version, hold on. Come here. Oh, come here. Come here. Oh, don't run. All right. We're going to have a guest star appearance, but I guess not. He ran away. Anyway, yeah, be sure to follow us on the social networks. Like, rate, review the show. God, that was such a... Ooh, shiny. Head to our website, mtgawines.com. You can check out the link to our summer newsletter in the description of the video here. Keep an eye out for our fall wine club release and wine release. If you're on our mailing list or in our club, that'll be coming out here shortly. Thank you all so much, again, for your interaction, your support, questioning my opinions and my thoughts on things. That means a lot. I love the challenge. Please continue to submit those as the episodes go on. We'll continue to incorporate, question and answers and things like that to what you guys want to learn more about, for sure. So have an excellent rest of your day, week, month, and we will see you here next time on the Wind Up Podcast. Cheers.